Get some new brakes put on here. Nothing too exciting. I got this ball joint, a new one. I just went ahead and stuck that in there. That took me like a 6-foot breaker bar to loosen that. So if you go to do that, be prepared to do some serious wrenching. My impact gun wouldn't break it loose, so I had to use a big 3/4 drive set with a breaker bar. So if you do that, you got to have some decent sized tools. This is pretty straightforward. Took the old one off. Remember, when you buy these new rotors, they don't come with bearings. So I've got new bearings. I pulled the races out of this just to look at them. They had the same part numbers as the Timkens, but they were not Timken bearings. So I went ahead and got new races and bearings in this side. Since all the part number matched that Timken, but actually they weren't Timkens. But I don't think I'm going to replace the races on the other side. They looked fine. I was just curious to see what the numbers were, if they said where they were made on them. So that's why I did that. So new bearings, races on this side. Got new pads, new rotor. This kit came with these rubber bands, which I've never seen before, and I had to look it up. And a certain kind of caliper adapter, it doesn't look like it's this one, but this rubber band actually goes around this piece here, the cast iron piece, and then allows the rotor to or the caliper to ride up against it. It must be an anti-vibration thing. This is the first time I've seen these, so I don't know if that's a new thing or I just wasn't aware of it for years, but I did not use them on this one, so I don't see that being an issue. But since I've never seen them before, and I've done these old Mopars before, but this caliper adapter is not square all the way around where that rubber band's supposed to go, so I don't see it sitting in there very good. So I went ahead and just used I guess I put on the other side already, the Caliper Grease. So I always just put that stuff on the backs of pads and anywhere that the rotor, or the caliper moves back and forth. So just some anti-squeak stuff. But that should be good. Feels good. I used the service manual on these. Says to tighten this nut to 240 inch-pounds while you're turning it, then back it off 90 degrees and then do it hand tight. So that's what I set those to, and they feel good. So I'm just getting ready to start the other side here. We'll get that underway shortly. I had to get a little clever with this flaring tool because I'd already run the line to this side. I wanted to custom cut it to length and not take the whole line back out since it's already bent around the frame. So I just clamped a piece of angle iron to that mount that I have for the brake line. A guy could mount it to do it to the frame or something too. So just stuck that on a piece of angle iron. I had to hold on to the angle iron pretty good to keep it from twisting. So I haven't taken it apart yet to make sure that the flare looks fine, but I think it'll be okay. The hardest part was having enough room for this lever to come around and not run into anything as well. So we'll see how that works. So I got both the front brakes done. Now we'll move on to other things. So hopefully my lines don't leak, but we'll know soon enough once I get the back down and can put some fluid in them and bleed them out. As you can see, I've had to change my wheel and tire package, going pre-runner style now. This was not planned. The wheels I had on there, the wheels and tires, the rollers I had, they were off of like a 60s Ford car, and it turns out the center of those wheels are small. I couldn't even get them on that 8 3/4 bearing end once I put it on there. I was able to get the wheel on the lugs enough to at least put a lug nut on there, but when I changed the front rotors, the center of the front rotors was too big, so they wouldn't slide on at all, not even enough to get the lugs to come, or the lugs to come out through the wheels. So I scrambled all around trying to find a set of something I could stick on here in the meantime, and these are all I had handy. These are some mud terrain tires off a Jeep Cherokee that I have, or that my brother has, so these are his spare ones. So they fit for now. Like I said, I can't put any sheet metal or anything on it until I get something else. But getting the rear brake line ran, and I had to make a little tab for this end of this brake line to attach to the frame. And I ran into kind of a snag because this is a it's like a nut in there that keeps the line from turning, and so you want that to be locked into something so the line's not trying to do the, you know, actually twist when the suspension goes up and down, because this rubber hose is not gonna give probably before that, I don't know. But so what I did is I drilled a hole that was just a hair smaller than this. It would fit this through it, but not the nut part. And then I had to mark the piece with a marker and hand file that. So it ended up coming out like that, which will work. It just took a little bit of time to get that to fit correctly in there, and that'll keep that hose from wanting to spin the nut on the hard line, or have the hard line try to spin inside here, inside where it mates to the sealing surface there. So I would recommend, you know, making sure that both ends are secure like that. Front's the same way, except it was round with just a little tab sticking out the bottom here, so that was easier to notch out with a file. I think I used the body saw for that. Cutting a whole nut shape in that tab was, so that's kind of a pain, but I think that'll work fine. And then up front, and I'll have to pull this back out, but I've got the rear line ran here along with the you see here along with the other one, so kind of trying to keep everything somewhat uniform. Here we are with the soft line attached. I tried to give it a little bit of a sweep down just to give me a little bit more room for the exhaust, if I can get it to go over the hump here. There's not a lot of room once the shocks get put on there to run exhaust over that, but we'll see. But I think that came out good. There's plenty of slack there for up and down movement, and then I gave it a little bit of angle to make it easier to get the sweep the hard line into the soft line, so I think that'll work pretty good. Here's a little brake bleeding trick that I've tried in the past and it worked fine. I haven't bench bled the master cylinder at all, so this should work in that case. So what I've done, and it doesn't have to be hardline, I just used some hardline because that's what I had and I know it's clean. So you bring to the farthest point on the front brakes, which is the opposite side, stick a snug tube on there, and then run a line over and put it in the master cylinder, and that way it creates a closed system that'll should cycle the fluid through and bleed the air out. So I'll loosen that adjuster on the other side and give this a try. You got to just make sure to watch your fluid level, because obviously if you run out you got to start over again. So we'll give this a try. I'm just by myself, so we'll see if this works. Well, it looks like that trick worked just perfect. I did it, started on the passenger side, and then once I didn't notice any fluid level changes, I tightened that bleeder and then came over here, did the same thing till I didn't see any changes, and then tightened it up, and now I've got nice firm brakes, at least for the front. I should point out too that PV tube bleeder goes in this where that switch is on the side. So basically it keeps the proportioning valve from working. I looked it up. That just sticks a pin in there to keep that, because if one side's not working, then it messes up the proportioning valve. So that keeps the proportioning valve locked in place, so you can bleed the front and then the back, or vice versa, without having an issue. So yeah, so I'm going to do this with the back now, straighten this line out, run to the back and do the same back there, and go from there. I think once I'm done with this stage, then I'll go back to the old school of just pump it, hold it, bleed it, you know, just to make sure that there's no air in it for sure. But this definitely works instead of bench bleeding it. So I got the brakes successfully bled front and back. Not finding any leaks in my fittings, but does look like I'm getting a leak where the soft line goes into the caliper down here. So, which it seems like I always fight with these. I've got extra washers. Everything's brand new, and I've tightened it as far as I've comfortably tightened. I feel like tightening that. So I think what I'll do is get some help and have somebody squeeze the brake and actually watch it and make sure fluids. I tighten it up some more, but I can't tell if I'm still losing some or not. It just seems like there's a lot on the floor pooling around that rim, but I can't really see where it's coming from up above. So maybe that's just from where I dropped that hard line, that hose between the bleeder in the master cylinder earlier, I kind of dumped a bunch of fluid on the ground, so it might just be pooling there. But I don't know, it feels kind of wet around that on both sides. So, but I mean, we've got the bench bleed successful. I got fluid at the rotor, at the caliper, so I'm real happy about that. The back seems to do fine, except I got a bunch of dirty fluid up here, which tells me it's working, but so I sucked that out of the master cylinder with the turkey baster and put clean fluid back in there. So I did not replace the wheel, what do they call those? The brake part that goes inside the drum, wheel cylinder, I think. I'm blanking. Anyway, I didn't replace those on either the side, nor did I replace the hard light on the axle itself. I blew it all out good with an air hose, so it shouldn't be bad, but maybe there's just a little bit of old fluid in there. But I think we got most of that out with what I did. Again, I'll re-bleed these the old-fashioned way. Just get a hose and a bottle, go around to each one of somebody sitting in the cab. But I don't even know I'm going to need that. The brakes feel nice and firm, but I need to get those leaks. If they're still leaking up front, I need to get that squared away, and then that'll be done. That'll be nice. I'm making a big mess this morning. Got brake fluid all over the place. Trying to get the brake line sealed to the caliper. I noticed that, let me see if I can even show this. See how those rings aren't evenly all the way around that washer? So it's not getting even pressure. And then on the other side, you can see how rough that all is. And that is because the surface of this is garbage. So I'm going to try to clean that up. I guess I expect that to seal. I'm not very impressed, so I might have to do this on both sides. That's where the whole brake system's going together fine, except for my brand new parts. So the stuff I made's all fine, but not this cheap Chinesium, I guess. So we'll see if we can clean that up with something. This is looking better. I just took a hand file and just filed that down flush. One of these. And then I stuck an earplug in there to keep the debris from falling down inside where the line goes. So hopefully that'll work. So I'll put it back on there and give it a try. I went ahead and pulled the other one and did the same thing. So I just took a hand file and cleaned that all up real nice. So since I'm making a mess and all the brake fluid's drained out, I might as well do them both. Fun times. Got the calipers reinstalled after filing down the mating surface on the banjo washer, and I'm still getting a little bit of a leak, so I'm just going to come back to that. I'm kind of frustrated with it. And maybe the washers I've got aren't very soft or something, and they're not conforming to the surface, or I'm starting to wonder if on the line side they've actually embossed some sealing surface, you know, some rings around it. That way there's a place for the washer to bite in, and the calipers didn't have that from the get-go. And I mean, the surface was terrible, but they weren't, you know, done like that. And then filing it makes the surface perfectly, well, not perfect, but, you know, real smooth. And, you know, I could see that maybe having an issue sealing, being too, you know, not having any deformities in it, but, or embossed or whatever you want to call that. But I don't know. So I'll circle back. Maybe I'll get some different washers. I tried several and just kept fighting with it. And you lose so much brake fluid, and I'm about out of brake fluid. I need to get some more before I go back into it. So I'm going to move on to some other things and then just come back to this later. It does stop, though. It just, like I said, it's got a tiny, tiny leak, which a guy could drive it that way if he really had to, but I'm not going to plan on that. Here's a rear shock mount I'm working on. This is just a plain piece of steel that was drilled to be the where the U-bolts go through on the bottom of the spring pack to hold the axle on. Anyway, so it didn't have any shock mounts on it. So I've got these, which I think that might be an original shock mount to these trucks. This is how it was taken off my parts pickup. It's been cut and already messed with. So I'm just I clamp this angle iron on here so I can find what so I can measure straight across here, and then So I've come down 1.25 inches and then cut that off. So that's what that is there. So I think that'll put the shock mount well above the bottom of the rim when it's on there, which you gotta have. You don't want body parts hanging below or chassis parts hanging below the wheel. So if you got a flat tire or something, you wouldn't hung up on a suspension part. So anyway, so I've just cut that off. I'll weld that on there and see how that looks. But I think that'll be fine. And that plate's plenty thick for that task. So working on replacing this rear Perches that I found that the center pin hole was too large on. So I've ordered these Perches from Summit Racing, just a basic for a 3-inch axle. There's your part number there. And then I ordered new center pins in case these ones didn't fit. It turns out neither of them fit the new spring perch, which was drilled at more than 1/2 inch, but little less than 9/16. This pin was way too big, as was the original. This pin was just a hair bigger than the original head was. I ground this one down just to clean it up. It had old paint and stuff on it, and it still wasn't fitting at the time. So I did some measuring, and then I drilled this out to 9/16, and then this was still just a hair too big, so I just kind of ground on it a little bit to clean it up, and now it fits in there, but nice and tight. But there's apparently more variables in these than I realized. I thought, well, I'll buy a brand new 1/2 inch head with 3/8 bolt, and this is supposed to be 1/2 inch, but this was larger than 1/2 inch by quite a bit. So I don't know, maybe there's just a lot more variables in these pins, that there was a lot of different sizes used across different vehicles. But anyway, so that works fine. I just again drilled that to 9/16, ground the head down a little bit. Now we got a nice snug fit, so we'll go forth with that, which is good. This pin was pretty rotten anyway, so now I don't have to reuse it. These were cheap, so we'll go that and then cut it down to length once it's installed. Oh, and then the pins that I bought, that's the bag they came in. So just a 3/8 tie bolt, 38-500 must be the part number on that. It had 2 bolts and 2 nuts. That's looking a lot better. Nice tight fit, flush, plenty of length to cut off. That ought to work. Getting the pinion angle set. So I put a bunch of weight on the back. I figured 20 gallons of fuel, add another 150 pounds on top of that. Should be more than enough, I would think, and that's pushed clear out on the edge. So that puts me to 3.5 degrees here. That's about what the engine's at. So the pinion's going upward and the engine transmissions are going downward. So that puts these at a parallel angle to each other. So they're both 3.5 degrees on the same line, on the same plane. So I did this with no weight, with this much weight. Really didn't make a big difference on the pinion angle. I went up and down like a degree or something. So, but this will be closer than if it were empty for sure. And I probably I'll probably just tighten the U-bolts down for now, and maybe not actually tack and weld them for a little. Well, no, I probably should, because I'm not going to have fuel and all this stuff in there, and then set the angle, I don't think. So I'll have to think about when I want to actually weld the Perches on. But this ought to get me close enough, I think.